In this tutorial, we'll be looking at this illusion wrapper with pleated effect at the top edge there. So I'll be using this plain damask fabric, and I measured it 2 yards and 24 inches. At the top there, I measured about 2.5 inches and I ironed it inwards. That is to give it a neat edge. Okay, so now this wrapper will have a lining, but you can choose not to. You can choose to make it without lining. The length of this wrapper is about 42 inches and I'll be using 2 inches for hemming. I equally iron that inwards. Now, at the left edge, I had this design on it. And so after making the design on it, I need to measure what I have. That's about 2.5 inches that I can fold it without it, without it interfering with the design. And at the other edge, I'm using 2.5 inches as well to fold it inwards. So the next thing, I want to get the midpoint of this wrapper. So now I'll fold it from the open edge to where I can have the folded edge with ease. Strengthening it out, I'll use a chalk to mark that point. Now I can use the scissors to notch this because I've already ironed in the 2.5 inches I'll be using for the hemming there. So marking that point, marking the midpoint, I'll measure it to the edge there and I have about 48 inches. Okay, so now having 48 inches, I'll be using 20 inches on both sides of this midpoint to make those pleats you're seeing there. So I'm simply extending the midpoint and I will start pleating. This pleating, I made it free-handed, but if you want to measure it, you can use 3 on 3 inches pleats. Now I have a tutorial on my channel that I showed how to make pleats. Okay, this is box pleat. Okay, you're using box pleat effect for this. So I'll pleat it from that midpoint to the 20 inches, on both sides of this midpoint. So here with the pleat, you will need a lot of pins. You need to pin it down before you iron it. Measuring this, so I'll be sure at the point where I have the 20 inches. I'll mark the 20 inches spot and then pin it. Okay, so doing the same thing to the right side of this wrapper, I'll pleat it just the way you're seeing me do. I'll pleat it and make it to the point of 20 inches as well. So that's just the first pleat and we'll be making about 3 pleats. Okay, so the second one, I folded it inwards as well. Like I said, I made it free-handed. Okay, but you can choose to make yours with numbers. Okay, so I'll pleat it to the spot I have 20 inches on the left and I'll pleat it again to the spot that I have 20 inches on the right. So again, I will need to make the third pleat. Okay, and I'll go back to that midpoint and fold it inwards like so. I'll pleat it to stop at the 20 inches I have on the left side and the 20 inches I have on the right side. So if this is the first time you've stopped over at my channel, please do well to subscribe and turn on your notification button so you'll be among the first to know when I upload new videos. So if you like it here, please subscribe. Thank you so much. And if this video gives you value, please give me a thumbs up so others can see it. Okay? Thank you so much. So after pleating this, we already have the 3 pleats that we need. Okay, so I'll flip it over to the wrong side of this fabric and I'll bring in this stay just to iron on the pleat. Now you see that 2.5 inches up there, you don't need to include it. All right, I won't put the stay on it. I'll simply open it up, okay, and then just make this stay gum to be on the pleat only. You can leave about 2 inches downwards, okay, and 2 inches above the pleat. After ironing it, I remove the pins, and this is what we have after gumming that stay on the back side of the fabric, okay. So flipping it over for you to have a good look of it, I I gum this stay, opening that 2.5 inches I have as the hemming for the top there. I gum it just on the pleat, okay, just to keep it in one spot. And you might not even know I made this, but because the pleat on the outside looks separate, okay. So now that's the effect that we need for this wrapper. And after that, I'm bringing in the lining. Now this lining, I made it about 22 inches length, okay, and the width of it is about 2.5 yards. And I'll bring the midpoint of the lining to the midpoint of the wrapper and sew it to both ends. Now remember, I have some hemming allowance at the edges, okay, all the way around this illusion wrapper. If you're not using lining, you can simply tack it or you use hemming gum, all right. So I I sew it to the edge there, and that's the 2.5 inches I folded inwards. If you notice, I added also the stay around the edges of this wrapper just to give it some stability, okay. So now at the corners of this wrapper, okay, note the way I iron them. So one is on top of the other, and I'm marking that spot which they meet, okay. I'm marking the spot which they meet, and then I'll open it up like this and fold it. Now those 2 points I marked, I'll bring them together, and if you notice, it has formed an ankle, all right. So I will sew it to the point that you see that, to the point that you form that ankle, okay. But if you're in doubt, you mark this on the reverse of the fabric, and then you open it up and use a ruler to connect the two points that you have marked, okay. That will be as a guide for you, okay, to stitch this part. So you simply stitch on the line that you have marked, okay, and that will give you a good ankle. After stitching that part, you will cut the excess that you have, and then you iron it open like this. And after ironing it open, you of course take it back, you turn it inside out, okay, and use either your needle or your scissors to just make that pointy part to come out properly, and then you iron. After ironing it, this is what you should have. Now this is what we'll be doing to all the four corners of this wrapper, okay. And then sew the lining to the spot which you have this. And so when you sew it to that spot, you simply fold in the excess of the lining. If it's too much, okay, you can trim it out. But like you're saying, I simply folded it inwards, mark the point that they meet, okay. So I'll fold it inwards properly and make sure I pin it to the length of the lining, and then I'll turn it to the reverse, to the bad side of the fabric. That's where you're seeing it, okay. You stitch it with 1/2 inch from the top there to the length of the lining, okay. That's where the lining stops, and I'll do this to both sides of the wrapper. After making like this, what I did, I simply made sure that the pleat gets to the end of this fabric. Now I won't be ironing that part. I simply needed a guide for this. And then the illusion wrapper, you make it around the hip region, okay. Get a point on the blouse and mark. That's where I'll place the hook, okay. Now this is optional. Place it on the hook, and then you mark the spot again on the wrapper, so you put the hook together, okay. and then they will now flow out with the corners like this. Now you can choose to use a hand needle and thread to make it on your client, okay? And then it just drapes downward like this.